Okay, guys, episode 007 of the Listening Game podcast. Of course, my name is Kevin. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, take a look at our YouTube channel. We have a description video of exactly what we're trying to accomplish here with this channel. And man, you're in for a doozy this week. We've got an incredible pair of guests. Our first time to have a two-guest episode. And they are none other than Adam and Tyler Rosen. So please welcome them to the Listening Game podcast. Not that we can hear your applause.
I heard some. I hear the clapping going.
I hear it in my heart.
Totally. And Kevin, I hate to start off this way, but he's actually Adam, and I'm actually Tyler.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Yeah, we
can't
are.
do that.
Yeah. You got it.
It's
right.
too
You
soon.
got it right.
We gotta
All
get
right.
in.
So
and then
spoiler alert, Adam and Tyler are twins, if you haven't noticed. And I think we should probably get that out of the way. Let's talk a little bit about that. Who's the oldest? Let's answer all the questions.
Oh yeah.
let's
So
see,
I like this part. So I'm the oldest. Makes me the smartest, the most handsome, the most, well-rounded individual there is, I think. So
Definitely
yeah,
the most humble, too.
Definitely the most humble. So yeah, I'm the older one. I qualify. I check all those boxes.
That's awesome.
no doubt.
Oldest, youngest.
That's true.
What
Youngest.
kind of traits come with the youngest?
I just look up to Adam my whole life. I'm just like the shining beacon of perfection.
Yeah. There's a lot of jealousy.
I just don't know how to handle it. So someday I claw a few of those boxes back, but for now it's just like the shining beacon on a hill that someday I'll reach.
You know, it's funny. You guys have told me stories before about tricks like the one you did at the beginning of the show, of really being able to pull off, like, convincing people you are the other person. Because if you haven't spent a lot of time in your presence, it's actually pretty tricky to figure out who's who. Can you share one or a few of these stories where you've managed to really kind of confound people?
So
which story are you gonna
how
tell?
about a recent story? So when was it? Maybe about a year ago. We were up in Lake Arrowhead, and we were there together. Actually, this was the trip we were there, and I remember we went to the village and we were shopping around. We were in and out of different stores, and at a certain point, Adam and I ended up in the same store. And
I think it's important to say that we had just the night before watched this documentary called Three Identical Strangers, which is where triplets were separated at birth and then found each other in college and went through this whole experience of meeting each other and discovering that they weren't, an individual.
So that was kind of the
story now, by the way. I'm already laughing.
So that was the context in the back of our head. So we're in the same store. And when it started, I think we were on opposite ends. I was into the left and he was back in like the deep right corner. And an observant woman in there, I think, tapped Adam on the shoulder and she says, "Sir, I can't help but notice, but is that guy related to you?"
She's like, you look a lot like him.
And then, of course, Adam says, "No, I don't have a..."
I just get the best idea in my mind. I'm like, wait a second. Wait, who? And she points him out, and I'm like, what? So she calls him over, and we have a pretend freak out in front of everyone. So, of course, we can be
What's your birthday?
And boisterous.
No way, that's my birthday.
What? Where are you from?
I'm from Houston. What about you?
Oh, I'm from Houston, too. Were you adopted? What adoption agency?
So, long story short, a crowd forms around us. Like, we kind of have a circle of people around us, and they're all so happy and giddy. And
people have their phones out recording, knowing that they're going to have the next viral YouTube video.
The worst part was having to break the news to everyone. Like, it kind of crossed that line. We're like, okay, they're really into it. Let's back
let's
off.
call this out. We had some good laughs. I think everyone laughed except for that one lady who introduced us, because she was so sure she had like the best story ever on her hands.
I'm sure she's laughed looking back. So
that was a good story.
That was fun.
Well, apart from the absolutely hilarious twin stories, which you guys have many more of them, and if you want more twin stories, hit them up on social media or something. I'm sure they could share more. But you guys have had a significant impact on the gaming space, the esports space, whether the folks here are watching it or not. And I'm very excited to have you on the show as a result of those things. Not just the contributions you've made already, but I know the work that is yet to come from you guys in this space. And so it's an honor to have you here. You're dear friends, but also I think individuals who will have a major impact on the future of the gaming landscape. And I'm excited to talk about those things and even just share that with the world. So thanks for being here with me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Kevin. I think we're both excited.
It's an honor. Let's start back at the beginning. I know the first time I think I recall that I met you guys. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm thinking back. I'm trying to remember.
When I was working at 38 Studios, I had a conference call with Kara LaForge, Sean Plott, you guys. There may have been someone else, but I think it was just you four. But to kind of brainstorm maybe launch event work for Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, or maybe even just general brainstorming. I can't remember. It used to be this sort of thing where we would kind of get together and just sort of talk ideas.
We have this thing.
It's like a brain trust.
What are cool things for the world to have?
How did you get into that mix? I want to talk. All the beginning. That's where I met you guys, and that was probably almost a decade ago now.
Almost. That's weird to say.
Probably, 2010, 2011.
That's surreal.
Yeah,
to think about.
That's crazy.
But obviously, you had made your way into the gaming space at that point. But let's step all the way back. I know you guys started being active in competitive gaming and esports all the way in your college time, right?
Yeah, that's
Austin,
right.
Correct?
Yeah, so we got involved in gaming for the first time, officially, I guess you would say, when we were students at UT. So Tyler and I both went to the University of Texas. We were both doing aerospace engineering and thought that was really fun. And we wanted something more. So we had always played games growing up. We played games together. We played games with our family. And StarCraft 2 was coming out. We were super excited because growing up, we'd always played StarCraft against each other. We were hyper competitive. We kept trying to beat each other.
I was a little better, but
it's like the one. No.
That's the one I have. Come on.
That's the younger advantage.
Yeah, you were really good that one game. You beat me.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we thought, hey, you know what? This is cool. Let's figure out where the gamers are and play with them. And we actually looked around and had a really hard time finding other gamers. There were, 1,000 organizations on campus for various interests, but there wasn't really anything for gaming. So we said, you know what? Let's start something. Like let's figure out, let's host a meeting. Let's figure out where other gamers are. Let's find people with similar interests. So we went ahead. We held our first meeting. We put up flyers around.
I remember back in the day posting on Team Liquid, and we actually found people at the school there, which is the old StarCraft forum, hanging up flyers around campus. And lo and behold, we were hoping to get 5-6 people out, so we had enough people to compete in a StarCraft tournament against other universities. And I think for that first meeting, we had 25 or 30 people. So the initial interest kind of blew us away. But I think the other thing that blew us away looking back is there were people who were at the meeting who weren't really proud to be there. We had people that were walking in and kind of looking over their shoulder and saying, is this where the gamers are? Like, is this where we're meeting? So you could tell, like, back in that time, like, gaming was still a very, like, personal activity. It wasn't something that was celebrated, at least at the level it is today. So what we recognized very early in that first meeting is that we were providing a home to students who had this deep passion and love of gaming, but for the first time had a chance to share it with someone else face to face, right? In a way that was accepting of them and of their passions. And because of that, it heightens, right? Like, they formed friendships and bonds, and we looked at that and we said, well, we can't stop doing this. Let's see how far we can take it. Let's see how far we can build it. So I think that was the initial origin at UT, where we said, there's really something here. There's this niche that isn't tapped. And more importantly, there's this like type of person who does not have a home to celebrate the things they love on campus. So
what year was this, by the way?
So this was 2010 when we started TESPA for the first time. And then from there, we grew the community over our time in college. We started hosting huge events like the Lone Star Clash. We started growing this community, and by the time we left, that organization was one of the top 5 on campus in terms of size, which we were very proud of.
That's
stepping
super
away.
Amazing. What was the framework you were, like you mentioned, these early days trying to get into competitions with other universities? Was there a framework you were looking to engage with? Because I know at some point TESPA was almost FOSS. By the way, TESPA is the name of this organization that Adam and Tyler built at UT Austin. And if you're familiar with some of the work that Blizzard's been doing, you've probably heard that name around, but this is sort of TESPA's origin story. But when you first started did you imagine that TESPA would be what it was, or what was the framework you were hoping to insert yourself in? Or,
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think when we started, we were very open-minded. We didn't really have a goal in mind other than finding people to participate. The program that we actually wanted to participate in was a CSL, or the Collegiate Star League. That was an established league that brought different colleges together to participate in, I think, only StarCraft at the time.
Yep.
So that was the motivating factor for us. And I think we really didn't know what it could become. I mean, I'm sure if we put ourselves back in those shoes, knowing where TESPA is today, it would have blown us away. But I think our kind of simple motivation there was continue doing what's right for this community, continue trying to bring people together, and find ways to bring really cool experiences to them locally on campus. I think because we're so competitive, we started thinking early on, like, okay, we can do esports too. Like, we're college kids. We can do this. We can host tournaments. We can host broadcasts. We can try to create big events. So that's what we started doing. We said, okay, let's figure this out. And we very quickly realized how little we knew about hosting events, setting up broadcasts, structuring tournament brackets. But I think what really surprised us was the kind of excitement in the community. People who had never done these things just like us before, but came out of the woodwork, put their heads together, and the passion drove them, and we created really amazing experiences. I know Lone Star Clash was one of those. If you want to give an overview of that.
Yeah, tell me about that. And I guess I'm curious when you felt like you hit that sort of tipping point beyond just like, oh, this is fun, to like, because I remember Lone Star Clash as a specific example became a very massive sort of StarCraft spectacle. I don't know, you ended up having like 4 or so before? I don't know.
Yeah, so we had 3 total. So I think I would consider that a tipping point for TESPA, because that was the point when we took what we were doing on the UT campus and made it essentially as public as it could be within that space to universities all around the nation and all around the world. So what we did is we were huge fans of these events. We would go to MLG events all over the US and say, oh, this is super cool. There should be something like this in our area. And we'd look up to all these players and all these casters and say, gee, wouldn't it be cool to meet these guys? Wouldn't it be cool to be a part of that? And we decided, you know what, let's just take it into our own hands. So we decided we wanted to have a huge event on campus. So we picked up the phone, we started going to events, we started networking, we got in touch with players, we got in touch with casters.
Let that be a lesson to you out there. Just ask. Just ask people.
Yeah, it was surprising
it kind of blew us away,
because we said,
like,
wow, you know what, we can actually do this. So we mobilized, we had a staff of like 60 students doing everything from partnerships to sales to promotion to stage design to hospitality to production to live streaming, which was very new back then. And
totally.
It was crazy for these events. The first one we raised something like $40,000. Next one we raised like $100,000 in sponsorships, and we were able to create this moment where we flew out not just the best players in the world, but we said, who are the people we want to meet? Who are the best influencers? Who are the coolest personalities out there?
The White Raws of the world.
The White Raws of the world. And we brought them out. And
don't knock his skill.
We dumped them in our dorm rooms. We turned our apartment into. It was a gaming. I think we had like 8 people staying with us.
Wow.
We tore out all the furniture in the living room. We turned it into a LAN center. All the bedrooms, we put bunk beds in. It was a lot of fun. And lo and behold, the viewership was insane. We had incredible viewership at that point.
I think we peaked out like for the early Lone Star, probably 50,000 concurrent viewers at any given time.
Yeah. Back in the day, very rare on Twitch.
Even for today, that's a pretty solid tournament. Right?
Yeah, like, totally fair.
Yeah. So that grew, and we said, you know what, we got to do it again. And it was at that point when we started having other people come to us and say, hey, this is really cool. How can I bring it to my campus? How can I have this in my area? And Tyler and I looked at each other and said, well, there's not really anything that's super unique about what we're doing or our approach. We just did it. So maybe we can take some of the lessons that we've learned and some of the inspiration that we've had and share that with others. So, of course, Tyler and I went on to graduate. We left the TESPA chapter at UT and the students' hands there, and then we started thinking about, okay, how do we grow this thing beyond? How can we expand what was on one campus to be a national phenomenon? How can we put it on every campus in the United States?
I think we started pretty informally too. I think for the first couple of months, we were mostly responding to folks that came to us,
Yeah.
local kind of universities nearby, folks that had been to the events, been to the community meetings, folks like UT Dallas, University of Houston, and we tried our best to kind of impart the knowledge and the lessons that we had learned onto them. And at that point, we said, well, let's make it official. How do we actually take this stuff out of our heads and out of our team's heads and kind of codify it? How do we give it to everyone? So that was what kind of became of the TESPA mission at that point. So we went out, we started talking to sponsors and potential partners, and I think that's when Blizzard came into the picture for the first time too.
Yeah, so let's jump forward to that, because like I know I had joined Blizzard in 2012. To work on StarCraft 2. And I remember, I think we rubbed shoulders even at that chapter. So we had been doing this brainstorming thing, and I'd obviously been connected with Sean and Karen and Day9 TV. And I remember Heart of the Swarm was coming up, and we wanted to do not just a typical Blizzard launch event, because they would take over the Irvine Spectrum and have a signing and that kind of thing that was very standard for Blizzard. But we also wanted to do something else. We wanted to tap into sort of community enthusiasm around StarCraft 2. We wanted to tap into the esports vibe, and bring that closer to campus. So it was actually a very unique moment for Blizzard, because I think even back then, the idea of having like strangers on campus, particularly in a large number or a large size, was just not something Blizzard was very open to doing. And so I remember I was like, I know the right people to talk to about how we make this happen, right? So we started meeting and talking about that, and we set up a live stream in the cafeteria area. You guys helped facilitate that. We pulled all the statues off of people's desks to make the set and
decorate it.
Totally. It was Husky, right? Husky, Day9. I think we're the ones who helped facilitate the community section of that stream.
Right.
And it was this whole ordeal. We invited a ton of folks to campus.
It was a 24-hour broadcast, right, from start to finish around the world. I remember the coolest thing too is all the community content that came pouring in and surfacing that on stream and letting people. This wasn't Blizzard's launch. This was the community's launch.
Dude, I forgot that we actually made that 24 hours, and we like
it's crazy,
we like
right?
passed the mic.
You don't remember pounding coffee in the back?
Totally. And it ended with the mic passed to us in some ways. We've had the Day9 Husky thing on campus, and then it like remote moved to the Spectrum, where we had that massive stage spectacle, right? And, dude, that was pretty ambitious.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
How many time zones? We bounced through a bunch of time zones, right? Like we had a European component, we had the Korea office, I think did something that was a piece of it. So
Australia,
it was really special.
Australia even had, I think they opened it.
They may have.
They did this outside, because I remember, watching the time zones flow through there. It was like, it's sunny here, dark here. It was like super, super fascinating.
It's like a New Year's celebration, but better.
Looking back on that time, what were your thoughts at that event? Like, were you like, I could see myself working at a place like Blizzard, or were the ambitions around TESPA and the goals that you had there still super bright, and no matter what happened, you knew this was a sort of a step towards continuing your future in esports. But I'm curious, having done that project, was that even something that was running through your mind? Or?
It's interesting. So I think Tyler and I are people who, like we never grew up thinking, I want to go work in games, or I want to go work for Blizzard. It just kind of happened to us. And I mean, even thinking about how we got started on TESPA, it was really just seeing this opportunity and following it and seeing where it would take us. So I think at that point, one of the things that I realized is, one, just further solidification that this community of people who are so passionate and excited when they get together, there's something there, and it deserves to be nurtured, and it deserves some, help to pull it together and make it even bigger and amplify what it's already doing. And then again, part of it is also just, the power of the Blizzard community as well was definitely a huge takeaway for me.
I think as we look back, like it's a really interesting question. I think Blizzard games were certainly a really big piece of our childhoods. It was a piece of our lives. Like I remember playing the original Diablo with my dad. Like we'd send Adam to my grandma's house so that I could stay at home and we could play StarCraft against each other online. So I think Blizzard always had this like air of kind of epicness, if you will, and importance in our lives. But actually being there and kind of seeing things, seeing the way people work, and seeing the kind of importance that they place in the community, in the games, and the experiences around them, I think was very inspiring for us. But even so, that event was, I think, about a year and a half before we actually decided to join Blizzard. So probably a fleeting thought at that time, but obviously over that next year and a half, as we started to try to figure out, where do we take this program? How do we fund it? How do we grow it? Who do we work with? Blizzard quickly emerged as someone who was super interested in helping us realize this vision. So I think the experiences we had back then with the heroes of the, not heroes, there's Heart of the Swarm. See, same acronym. It always gets me. With the HOTS launch party, I think it really just solidified the level of passion and kind of energy around Blizzard, and it gave us a lot of confidence.
Man, those massive sort of room-sized posters that we had printed out for the cafe, those are all still on campus. It's actually really,
are they really?
You'll see them. Yeah, if you walk through the Team 1 area, I'm not sure where they are now, but I'm sure they're either at Classic Games or still in the Team 1 Building 7 area. But
that's awesome.
It's super cool because it still says Day 9 TV on there. And all this stuff. Super cool. It's interesting to hear you say that. So you had a year and a half between, let's say, that launch event and what happened at Blizzard. I'm curious, Blizzard's interest, as someone who was on the inside of StarCraft 2 work at Blizzard, I knew there was this keen problem with very, very top-heavy conundrum around pro play in StarCraft 2, right? You have this pro scene that is manifest and supported, particularly when WCS came into play. But there was really no clear pathway of fostering like a road into it. You either kind of self-willed yourself, on ladder, or hang out on Team Liquid, figure out how to get involved. But there certainly wasn't an approachable road to it. And I think what you guys were doing, what TESPA was doing, just to speak a little bit about why I think Blizzard saw that as super valuable is because you guys were absolutely figuring out, how do we foster this from the grassroots, right? How do we lay the foundation that the pro scene can sit atop, rather than just having it wobble, super top heavy. So I know that when you guys did make the decision to join, TESPA was a piece of that conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess the way that conversation officially started is we were out looking for partners to help fund TESPA's growth and TESPA's expansion. We still had this vision of a chapter focused on gaming on every single campus in the world, and the US is where we started. So Blizzard was one of those partners we reached out to, and we had amazing conversations. I remember us coming to campus and pitching that vision we had, and we met with a few folks. I remember we met with I believe you were actually you were a part of those conversations. We met with Amy Morheim. We ended up working with.
So you guys all knew I was on your side.
We got Kevin.
I was
for sure.
Got one. We got one.
More like, you got to navigate the Blizzard thing. It's tricky in here.
I remember early on, it was Chris Siggety was also a part of it. Kim Fawn, who we got to know and work with super well. But I think we spoke to our vision, and we spoke to how important we thought the grassroots were and why it was being underdeveloped. And I think the team really saw that, and they decided that it was such a powerful kind of thing that we were trying to achieve that Blizzard wanted to support it. I still remember the outpour of support. It's like, what do you need to bring this to life? It wasn't, okay, what can we do this? Okay, we can do this, this, and this to support you. No, it's anything you need. What is it? Let's talk money. Let's talk promotion. Let's talk everything that you would imagine. And I think that really we looked at each other and said, these guys really get it. They really believe. And I think that was something that was special to us.
Yeah, we saw very early on that Blizzard really cared so much about cultivating that community and cultivating that ecosystem, not just at that professional level, but across all aspects. So for us, it resonated. It resonated very well. And we said, okay, maybe Blizzard is a partner or home where we can take what we were building before and take it to the next level. Maybe with the support and the funding and the resources and the mentors, we can take, this thing, which at that point I think was like 10 or 15 chapters, and blow it up all across the United States. Totally. So at that point, we talked about it, and it was a difficult decision, and we finally decided, what, this is worth going for. So we quit our jobs. We were both in consulting. Tyler, actually, funnily enough, I don't know how public it was. He quit his job the night before he was supposed to start
It was
because we had decided to join Blizzard.
intense.
So I think it was like 3 a.m. We're like, all right, cool, we're doing this. We're all pumped. He's like,
we were up all night talking.
wait, I
I
gotta
gotta
write
send an email real quick.
It's funny that the email response I got back was it was fairly classy. It was a one-line. They actually mailed me a letter, and it was one line. It said, "We hope you've made the right decision with your new career." And it was a full page. And looking back, I'm like, ugh. But now I'm like, I'm pretty sure I did. Like,
Yeah, that's definitely the right decision.
Oh man, that was such an interesting start to what I think is a very remarkable chapter of your life. There's some incredible things that we get to dig into now, and I'm very, very excited to talk about that. And even at the time, the esports team at Blizzard was, at least on campus, was really small. Like,
I think there were 7 people.
Yeah,
I think there were
Something like that.
7.
6, 7, 8, somewhere in there.
Totally. At that time, it had shifted from, it was like an extension of community for a really long time. It was like publishing and community, and esports kind of sat in there. And I think at that point, it was beginning to sort of grab it, build some legs and sort of establish itself a little bit outside, or have the potential to kind of stand on its own, which is really fascinating to think about how far it's come since then in that way. But so you joined Blizzard and TESPA. Some of my early thoughts or memories of you guys joining too was, Blizzard's always had this internship program. And I remember you guys somehow managed to like tap the well on the internship program with this bring on this fleet of college
We called them the
kids.
Horde. we somehow convinced them to let us have 9 interns.
Right, yeah.
And I think, to be fair, our full-time team was 3 people at this point.
Yeah.
So each of us had 3 interns, and I think we were actually, looking back, we were very lucky in that we had the cream of the crop. Like, you look at the network, and we effectively handpicked chapter leaders who had done the same thing we had on their own campuses, but were a couple years behind us in their college careers. We picked the best of the best to come out to intern with us and actually build their program, because it was their program. So, it was
I just remember there being
fun.
this section of... man, what building was that at the time? Was it 7? Yeah,
it was building 7.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Building 7,
this section of building 7 that was just like tight, shoulder to shoulder. People in there working, just
we were a little
away.
tight on room.
It was awesome. It was super cool. So, talk to me about the growth of TESPA, and then also I'm interested in getting into some of these larger initiatives that, as you guys got your feet in there, it was initially like TESPA, but then clearly sort of the vision you guys have had to grow esports or even have an impact on a larger level became very useful and helpful in other initiatives, whether that be BlizzCon, the launch of Heroes of the Storm, and figuring out how we, sort of share that message with the world, or share the potential of the game with the world at a broader stage. I'm curious to hear both sides of that, the growth of TESPA initially, and how that ramped. You said 13 chapters. Where did it go from there? And then how did you get involved in some of these bigger Blizzard projects?
Yeah. So I think we can take TESPA first. The TESPA arc was really fun for us. I remember the first time we got into Blizzard, we sat down with the team, and they said, "All right, guys, we got to build your 5-year P&L." And we kind of looked, we're like, what do you mean a 5-year P&L? And we're like, okay, no problem. So we started throwing, okay, cool, we'll have 30 chapters, and then we'll have 50 chapters, and we'll do 100 chapters and 200 chapters. And we kind of looked at each other, and we're like, we're not going to be able to do this. It's going to be so hard, but okay, let's do it. And you know what? Looking back, we shattered it, right? TESPA grew by leaps and bounds. We started... partially with the help of the intern hordes, we grew like crazy. So over the course of the next few years... You
built a web platform.
Yeah, we built this web platform, and you can think of it almost like TESPA grew into these 2 parts. We had the community part, and we had the competitive part. And the community side, you can think of almost like a fraternity for gaming. So just like you would have fraternity chapters at campuses around the US, we had gaming chapters on campuses around the US where students would come together, they'd host huge epic events on their campuses. They'd rally this community, they'd pull together students, and we'd give them resources and support to be able to do it bigger and better.
And we would bring them sponsors.
And we'd ship them
support.
ship them equipment, and we'd shine a spotlight on them. And that grew like crazy. So now TESPA is 300 chapters across the United States, Canada, and Korea, which is really gratifying to look back and just think about the impact that one initial chapter had. All of the students who were putting that together became the framework for this now global model. And then the other side of TESPA that kind of sprouted up was this competitive side. It was, hey, we've always enjoyed the idea of competition. I mean, us being twins, we competed at everything. We still compete at everything, right? We said, okay, well, how do we bring that to the next level? So we took inspiration from colleges. We looked at college sports. Going to Texas, Tyler and I didn't really follow sports before, but you bet by the time we left, we were college football fans. And we looked at what was happening in the sports world, and we said, why isn't this happening for gaming? So we decided to create this competitive arm where we created these national leagues where universities from around the U.S. would compete against each other, playing not football or basketball, but Hearthstone and StarCraft and Overwatch and Heroes, of course, which we can talk about. But that grew like crazy, and to date, TESPA's had over 1,200, 1,300 different colleges participate in the suite of competitive programs. So
amazing, man! It's super awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really amazing looking back, seeing the progress that the organization has had and will continue to have in the future. I mean, now in the US, really awesome team. I think what's really interesting to me is the stat of how many varsity programs there are. So when we started, universities, like I know UT just kind of looked at us and said, oh, okay, that's cute, go do your thing.
And even actually in some cases pushed back, right? Like I remember it was probably Lone Star Clash 2. No, it was the first one.
It was the first one.
We rented several rooms on campus. We rented a big theater, several ballrooms, and we started hosting our production, setting it up. So we brought in our cameras, all of our production equipment, the computers, and one of the administrators came by and they said, what is all this? And we're like, oh, no, let us explain. This is esports, this is gaming. So we explained it and they're like, what the hell are you doing? And we got a letter from them after the event. They're like, you're not allowed to host events on campus this way anymore.
Wait, no. It's because we had sponsors. But
that was the key piece of it.
We were smart because we read you're able to have sponsors if you say, you can't say sponsored by T-Mobile, but you could say, special thanks to T-Mobile. So all of our sponsors were special thanks to. But I guess that didn't go over the right way because
they didn't appreciate
various reasons. So we ended up having to move off of campus. But anyways, we went from that world to this world where we have over 200 universities in the US now giving official scholarships and for students to come play games on behalf of their university.
It's just crazy, right? Like how far the world has come in the last 10 years from, hey, don't do this on campus, to, hey, we will pay your full tuition to come play Overwatch for us. Night and day transition, and it just makes me so excited for what's actually next in the college space, right? I'm sure, I know the TESPA team has some really cool plans there too, so I'm sure it will continue being a leader in that space. But awesome. Really exciting to see the progress.
Yeah, man, I love it, and it's amazing, and it's been really awesome to watch it go from where it started to where it is now. Now, switching over to the Blizzard side, there's a couple marquee moments that I want to ensure the world is aware you guys had a massive impact on, and I think it's amazing when I think back on these moments. I think they've had, beyond just the collegiate esport piece, these are some more, pretty historic moments, particularly for Blizzard as it relates to esports. And starting with the sort of digital projection stage for StarCraft 2. I remember, StarCraft 2 back in the day at BlizzCon, it had kind of the oldest stage. It was almost
it was barely a stage.
It was barely
maybe the best way to say
it. It was like old styrofoam, like falling apart, like it'd been moved and set up a little bit too many times. And I remember there was this need to be like, how are we going to revamp this? And you guys were like, we got this. And it was like the craziest plan to have this, digital projection screen that would shift depending on the battleground and all that stuff. And you guys were completely accountable for that and responsible for that, and a super huge moment. And it was back when I think some of that stuff was just beginning to enter esports. Now we see, the international everywhere. Going crazy with like AR stuff and, incredible use of digital technology to heighten esports. But that was a really awesome moment, especially having it integrated with the transitions in the map or the player announcements and the names and how it all changed. pretty remarkable stuff.
I think looking back, that was one of the more fun early projects that we did early. It was very new, right? It was riddled with risk and riddled with challenges. I think. And we probably worked together on some of this, but we literally exported game assets from StarCraft and gave them to the folks we had who are actually developing the content. And it's fully animated, and when you picked a map, it would all kind of animate in. And when things changed, you had supply bars that would go up and down. But it was one of the more interesting projects because of how innovative it was for the time.
And maybe we should paint the picture of what that looked like. Sure. If, the StarCraft at that point was, we put it in the arena for the Anaheim Convention Center. Right. So you have this massive arena, and the stage was so big that it would only fit really in one orientation in that arena. It was, at that point, I think one of the largest freestanding projector, maybe the largest freestanding projector mapping projects in the entire world. So we built out this entire white set, and the only color you got was from the projected images on it, and it moved and it flowed and it connected with the game the entire time.
That's right. So, I forgot that it was totally hand in hand with the need to move into the arena, both in terms of expansion and to sort of fill that space in a noble way or an appropriate way, right? Yeah. So that's absolutely right. Yeah. That's super cool. Yeah. So that's one. Number two would be Heroes of the Dorm, which was actually a plan that came about very fast. When you talk about riddled with risk and all of this.
Let's see a trend here. Riddled with risk. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
Let's dive head first in.
Heroes of the Dorm for the first year. Fascinating experience because ESPN was involved.
Right.
It was one of the first times that a large-scale competitive esports event had made its way to mainstream television, and man, was that just amazing! Like the exposure on Twitter from the non-esports world to competitive games being on ESPN was honestly one of the most satisfying nights of my life to read these tweets. You can go back and probably find some of these tweets.
I'm sure they're still there. Yeah.
You'll find the videos.
People saying things like, why is Dungeons and Dragons on ESPN?
It's so cool because you had half the world that said, I don't know what this is, but I love it. And the commentators are crazy and I just can't turn away. And you had the other half of the world that says, get off my lawn. I am not okay with this. This is not football. Take it away. So that dichotomy, I remember sitting there in my finals and during the finals, and the phones are just lighting up, and we're tweets like sports teams tweeted and celebrities tweeted. We're like, oh my
Colin
God.
Coward, right?
That's right. And you could still go watch that video.
Find that, Google Colin Coward
Heroes of the Dorm or gaming
or something. He goes crazy on it.
It was so cool. So that event just in general we said how do we turn heads, right? How do we bring attention to this and do something really good at the same time?
And it tied into sort of this collegiate esport thing that you guys were already involved in.
Yeah, and I think, another interesting piece, not only was it on ESPN, but we were giving away full college scholarships to the winning team.
That's right.
And, I like to think that today's, spirit or environment where we have all of these colleges giving scholarships officially was started partly by the trend that Heroes of the Dorm started. Yeah. So it was amazing. It was the first time we had esports on ESPN. And I think also as we look towards the next couple of years after that of esports, the conversations, the awareness, even the naysayers created this positive effect where more people were looking in, more people were becoming aware of esports and competitive gaming and what it meant. And I think it propelled the entire industry forward because now you had sponsors, now you had these mainstream media outlets looking at it and say, this is okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe we should start learning about it.
For sure, man.
Yeah, I look back and I think, at least as far as our lens at Blizzard, that was definitely a tipping point in terms of interest from third parties, interest from colleges, interest from sponsors. It all kind of changed within that dialogue of, it's big enough, there's people talking about it, I can't miss out. So it transitioned from this thing of, it's a little on the edge, I'm not totally sure what it is, to oh my God, this ship's going. And if I don't get on, I'm going to miss the opportunity.
You know what else was super fascinating about that now, thinking back, because I had a brief moment on the desk and on the set with some of that stuff. And working with the production staff. So the production staff that was involved in that show was a very classic ESPN-driven production staff. And they knew very little about esports. And so the the comfortability of these pros like Day9 and Grubby and Artosis, and I think Tasteless were involved in this one in particular. They're very comfortable with the standard esports thing, but ESPN has no idea, right? And they're comfortable with the sports thing. So that was actually a really fascinating event, not just because of the cultural collision, but the actual technical broadcast collision of ESPN meets esports was eye-opening, just to see like how far the two were from each other, but yet still doing a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember starting that journey and thinking, okay, how hard can it be to get a video game on TV? And then you start having meetings with the ESPN production teams, and they're like, all right, so just to make sure you're color safe and your title safe and you have a 5-second delay to
and you've got your bleeper also here's a 90-page document and you need to conform to all of this.
We had to make a whole custom UI.
That's right.
We had to change the game to be able to broadcast that thing on TV.
Sure.
I guess the other thing about Heroes, right, like with the colors, like the reds are bright, the blues are bright, the purples are bright, and you're not allowed to push that through on TV because if it bounces out of certain ranges, it can actually damage old TVs. So they're very strict about what your range has to be. So there's all kinds of crazy equipment we had to employ that
the whole dev team had to pivot around that. And
that's right. And they did amazing work. We're
still forever thankful for that.
Looking back, there weren't optimal timelines, but I think it's really special to see how a team like that can pull together when you have this huge opportunity. And it's hard at times, it's new at times, you're doing something that's never been done. So naturally there's this tension and there's this need to learn as you go. But seeing the Heroes team rise to that challenge and deliver such an awesome product by the end, I think was super cool to see.
It's so fun to think back on it. I take these moments for granted, and it's really fun to sit and talk with you guys about it because they were very momentous, and sure, Heroes never became this incredibly massive, thing that say League or Dota in terms of its scale, but the cultural impact that these moments have had, I think are really significant. And like you said, the sort of cross awareness and all of those things kind of stack on each other, and it's kind of brought us to where we are today. A couple other moments that I want to ensure we talk about, because again, I think they had really lasting cultural impact, and that was shifting to talk about Hearthstone a little bit. You guys got pulled into figuring out how to make more of local connections around playing Hearthstone. And this burgeoned into a program that was called Fireside Gatherings, right?
That's correct. Hearthstone? That is correct.
And walk me through how that began. What was the initial problem you were trying to solve? How did you come up with this decision? And again, I am fully aware that the implementation of all of these programs was the result of many, many people and many, many people's work. But I know the seed for a lot of these ideas, and in particularly the feather ruffling that came from what you want to do. What?
We like to ruffle feathers.
We can blame you guys for a lot of that, thankfully. Walk me through the sort of Fireside Gathering program, because I actually feel like I see the DNA in even games like Pokemon Go, like the DNA of what you guys were doing with Fireside Gatherings. I mean, in some ways, we can attribute it to Friday Night Magic, right? They probably planted that seed initially, but to see that transition over and kind of find its way into the digital space, and really cool.
Yeah, it's super interesting looking back. Hearthstone was an amazing game. Like when Hearthstone came out, I could not stop playing it. I think we all played it, kind of took the office by storm, but the piece that Hearthstone was missing was the social aspect, right? Like you look at the game and you have 6 emotes and you can add people as friends and talk to them if they accept you, but it lacked this kind of deep social community driven experience that a lot of other modern games had. So,
and also I'll say it was very important to the development team to be able to have these community touch points where you have this social culture that comes, from playing the game.
So I remember very early days, like sitting down with a Hearthstone development team, talking about where these gaps were and just brainstorming, how can we solve these? And
I think I remember the challenge that was given to us was, what does Barcraft look like for Hearthstone?
Absolutely. There was some precedence around these gatherings.
Because if you remember Barcrafts for StarCraft phenomenon that popped up around StarCrafts, where bars would host an event when StarCraft was playing a tournament, and people get together and watch the tournament finals together and have a great time. And it was huge. It was massive. It was everywhere. It's the most like physical community manifestation of the game. And Hearthstone, it didn't really have that same inherent motivation where, great, we're all going to go out and watch the super hyped up tournament, right? It was more about play and participation. So, like Tyler said, we got together, we had a ton of brainstorming meetings, throwing ideas against the wall, and eventually we decided, what would be great is if we can create this culture where people can rise to the occasion. They can host local events. They can team up with local, places, not only bars, but coffee shops and game stores and PC cafes, and really be a home to these communities. And that evolved over time to say, okay, great, maybe in each local community we'll have a tavern. And just like in the world of Hearthstone, where you can walk down and to your local tavern and find a friend to have a drink with or to sit down and play with, you can do that in real life. So over time that evolved, and now there's some really awesome integration with the game. So not only is it, hey, cool, we're getting together, at the local spot at 6 o'clock on Saturday, it's, hey, guess what? We have a tavern, we have a name, we have certain benefits inside the game.
Custom card backs.
Card backs, all sorts
bonus
of cool
experience,
stuff. Pre-release content before the rest of the world gets to see it. And it's been amazingly successful. I think we've had firesides in over 100 countries. I know the number that I saw before was over 200,000 physical events all around the world, and it's really special to be able to grow that. You're right, we can't take all the credit here, right? There's a big team that came together and still manages that program to continue to evolve it.
I feel like part of the inspiration came from our experience at TESPA, right? Like one of some of the most meaningful game experiences that I've had, I think it's safe to say we've had, it's just playing with other people face to face, right? There's something special about sitting across the table from someone and sharing that experience centered on gaming. So the idea was, how do you take that and how do you expand that? How do you give that to people all over the world who love Hearthstone? And I think, the amount of events, the amount of countries, like that's a universal language, right? Like gaming is something that brings people together. And
what's interesting to me also about it is the way that we think about games is, at the end of the day, it's not about the game. The game is a mechanism. The game is a tool to bring people together. It's a forcing function for building these relationships and these friendships and these deeper connections that otherwise wouldn't exist. And we've seen it time and time again with all of these programs that we're talking about. We see the strength of that, and cool. I think Firesides is a really great representation of that.
You guys even, if I recall correctly, pulled in some pretty big early sponsors on that, right? There was like I know. Getting major sponsors to support some of these initiatives was a challenge, right? It's so new, and I think that if I remember, McDonald's was involved for a while.
I remember. We had Coke and McDonald's for the beginning launches.
Totally.
Super cool. It's crazy because I think today we're in a different world. But
it's totally different.
Like looking back, it was challenging. You don't want to be the marketing guy who says, "Great, we're gonna take a big risk on this new thing, which I think has potential." Right? Nobody's ever gotten fired by signing up for buying more ads, but you could. You put your name out there, and if it doesn't go well, it's risky. So now I think we're at this point where there's a lot of brands that are starting to recognize the value of not only the demographic, but esports as a way to reach that demographic.
Totally.
And we see it a lot more prevalently. But in the beginning, it was tough, right? And I think we're all really grateful for the brands that we worked with who said, I think there's potential here. I think we're able to come together and try it and see what happens and let it grow from there.
All right, well, we could talk about Blizzard's side of all of this for a very long time. I actually really enjoy processing this stuff with you because, when you're working heads down at Blizzard, like time just flies so fast and, so much happens in a short amount of time, and it's really fun to process it with you guys. But let's talk a little bit wider about esports. So, we've talked about your time at Blizzard, but even a lot more happened in the wake of your latter years. Like we saw, the Blizzard acquire the Blizzard Arena and begin doing shows there, the birth of the OWL and sort of this large scale franchised approach to esports. And, I want to maybe talk about esports at a large scale here in a second, but I also want to talk about obviously you guys are not with Blizzard anymore. Let's transition out of that. Talk to me a little bit about the decision to step into something else. And I know you haven't quite begun to talk about what that other else is, and that's totally fine. I won't pressure you to give away.
There's an else.
Pressure you to give away your secrets. But talk to me about the decision to leave, or pursue another chapter here, because we've heard some incredible stories about the amount of achievements you guys managed to acquire is the wrong word, but execute at Blizzard, and I'm sure there was going to be plenty more coming your way. Mm-hmm. But talk to me about the decision to leave, and what maybe you're going to be focusing on next.
Yeah. Good question. So I think one of the things that Adam and I talked about very early on is, I remember us thinking when we decided to come into Blizzard, we said, how long will we stay? Like, what is okay, maybe we'll be there for a couple of years. We'll see how it goes.
I don't think we thought we were going to be there more than 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, but I think the thing we landed on was, as long as it's fun and as long as we're having a wonderful impact and we're being challenged and we're able to actually change the shape of the industry, we'll be there. But when it stops being fun and we aren't able to have that same impact, maybe it's time to start looking elsewhere and figuring out what else can we do, right? We've had the wonderful opportunity to touch so many different projects in Blizzard, meet so many amazing people, work with such great teams. But I think toward the end, cultures change, right? Yeah. And as business priorities change, there's certain decisions that have to be made, right? Yeah. I remember thinking back in my last year, I'm like, wow, we're spending so much time internally, focused versus actually building what's right for the community and trying to deliver great experiences. So I think, it's a long story, right? But I think maybe the best way to sum it up is we knew that we wanted to start having more impact and more fun. And the best way to do that would be looking externally and going back to our roots, thinking about, what does this industry really need? Yeah. What can we do that we're best positioned to do out of anyone in the world to shape the future of how people interact with gaming and interact with esports? And we started talking about that, and we got super excited by the opportunities. And I think between things changing at Blizzard over time and those sorts of exciting opportunities on the horizon, we knew it was time. So we stepped back from Blizzard and have subtly in the background been working on spinning up that next chapter of our lives in the next company that we're building. And it's a little early to probably talk about too many details, but we're pretty excited about the opportunity that's held there. Yeah, man.
Well, obviously, I'm anxious to hear more about that. And whenever you want to talk more about that, we'll have you back on. We'll dig into it some more. But obviously, a lot changed over the course of your time pre-Blizzard to post-Blizzard. We went all the way from, community-driven grassroots esports to major investments in franchised esports with OWL. I'm curious to get your take on that. Where's the positive part of that? Where are maybe the weaknesses of that? I'm curious to get your take on esports as it stands right now. What do you think's healthy about it? What do you think maybe has gone too far, or maybe isn't healthy? Who do you think is doing esports well these days? I just want to get your broad take on the ecosystem, particularly knowing where you came from to where we are now.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that we've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few months as we just think about the overall esports landscape. I think what's it's interesting. It's very different from where we came from. When we started in esports, nobody knew what esports was. We spelled esports with a capital E and a dash, right?
It's email.
That makes sense. Email. It's a completely different world.
It's so funny because I still see that. I'm collaborating with some teams right now, and I'll still see that stuff on internal documentation.
Maybe you need better teams to work with, Kevin.
When I see E-gaming, I'm like, oh man,
we got to talk about this. Yeah.
Those e-gamers.
But so there's good about where we came from. I remember when we were starting, we just looked forward to the day when esports was so ubiquitous within our culture that we had esports so ingrained in our lives, just as we do traditional sports or traditional forms of entertainment. And I think we're on the path to get there. I think, a lot of the leagues, especially a lot of the franchise leagues that have been coming up recently, have been doing a good job to build awareness and create fandom in areas where even if you aren't a hardcore fan or hardcore player, you can kind of get behind the team and you become a part of that community and a part of that culture. But I think if I'm looking at the overall industry right now, some of the missing pieces is I think there's been a lot of attention on the top of that pyramid, right? Let's build the beacon. Let's build that really flashy thing that is going to attract sponsors and interest and hopefully fans. But there hasn't been as much effort on, I think, the rest of that pyramid, right? For sure. Making gaming and making esports a lifestyle thing beyond beyond playing if you're the top player in the world or being a fan when the top player is watching. So when I give esports an assessment, I think that's a natural case, right? I think it's very natural that it's been built in this way because the groups that are primarily funding these things, the publishers, are very incentivized by building that awareness, right? The more people who are aware of what you're doing, the more touch points, the more engagement you have around that, the better. And I think it's as I think about what the next step is, it's really fleshing out the bottom of that and making it more of a lifestyle a form of entertainment or activity.
And even looking at the top of the pyramid, I don't think many people, some people of course, but I don't think a lot of people realize how expensive a lot of this stuff is, right? To put on an operation like the Overwatch League, it takes an army and it's a very intense effort and it's months and months of planning, even leading up to this first broadcast, right? So there's so much investment that's happening at the top. But to Adam's point, there's not much beyond that, because in order to accomplish that top at a level that you're happy with and at a level that you think will drive your brand and your league forwards, it becomes the priority, right? So we look at those, and I think that was some of our kind of early thinking with what other opportunities are there in the ecosystem. It's how do you look elsewhere? How do you look downwards? How do you give everyone that opportunity and not just kind of the top of the 0.1% of players? Speaking about kind of the move of kind of revenue and all that you mentioned in the industry, I think it remains to be seen how profitable and how sustainable a lot of that investment is. I look back on our time at Blizzard, and one of the things I wish we spent more time focusing on is how to accomplish these amazing broadcasts and these amazing events at a much lower cost, right? Like there's so much creativity in the esports industry. There's so much innovation, but a lot of the innovation is placed in ways that are flashy rather than ways that are actually going to promote the sustainability of a lot of those big events and a lot of those big broadcasts. So I think in order for those events and those leagues to continue being successful, it's not only how much revenue can we bring in from sponsors and from media rights, and that's a lot of the focus, right? It's what can we do to make these operations and these broadcasts and everything that is needed to accomplish this league more cost effective than more sustainable. If you treat it like the NFL, you're never going to be able to kind of make that sustainable, right? So I think that's a big piece. And we talked a little bit about that back in Blizzard days, but as I look forward and like the challenges facing a lot of these kind of larger form leagues and the publisher driven efforts, I think that's a piece that a lot of people should be thinking about more.
Totally. That makes sense. Do you feel like this franchised approach to esports is kind of here to stay? Do you think that's, or is still kind of yet to be seen?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I believe very heavily in local experiences, right? Like the ability of Vancouver and San Francisco and all these different cities to have local esports activities and teams to cheer for in their backyards is very, very special, right? Totally. I think it's the reason why there's such drama around traditional sports, right? It's like the UT versus OU, like you have some affiliation with that brand because of your location. You know a person that lives there. You've had some kind of impact with it, right? So I think that part's fantastic. I think the part of the franchise model that remains to be seen is, can these franchises turn it into a sustainable endeavor financially for them, right? Fair enough, the franchise fees that have been reported, they're big numbers, right? These guys are investing a lot of money into building a brand, building a team, and there's a lot of ongoing expenses. You have to pay players' salaries, you have to pay staff, but the revenue coming back, I don't think yet is kind of a great equation for the franchises. So the sustainability of that model, at least in my mind, is how can these teams turn their teams into businesses, and how do they diversify their revenue streams in a way that allow them to continue kind of growing as a business and ensure their longevity for 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
And I think that's a point to reiterate is I think about it as a long-term play, right? I think about franchising as if you think about it in the short term, it probably doesn't make sense. But if you think about it in the long term, it absolutely does. And Tyler talked about,
particularly as games come and go, this idea of
totally this persistent, ongoing brand which people are relating to throughout their life. I think it's really important. And I do think that this relevancy aspect that a franchise system brings about is really important. I think, especially if you're going to break out of, having this point where only players are watching and only players are caring. If you're going to break out of that, you need to be able to provide more touch points than the games and the players. You need to be able to make it about your city or about this brand or about something that people care about. And I think the franchise system does a really good job introducing this relevancy that is a little bit missing in non-franchise systems.
Yeah, no, it makes sense because back in the days of old, it was these obscure, not obscure now, but names like Evil Geniuses and Team Liquid, and it's like if you're in the scene, you kind of get it. But if you are somewhat tangential to it, you're like, how do I relate to this?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, what is a Team Liquid?
I think where I net out on it is, I think the franchise model is very, very interesting, and I think there's a path to make that a very viable model. But there's some steps to get there.
For sure. It's interesting. Wade Penfold, or Dreadnought, he was one of my early interviews on this show, and he said something that actually touched my heart, because I fully believe this too, which is that esports are primarily, like, when you look at their history, they were community driven, right? They were fostered by the enthusiasm of a community around a product. And he kind of raised this question or this challenge around the fact that, like, maybe the cart's gotten in front of the horse a little bit. This idea that, like, pushing the business or the marketing of your game has superseded your interest in fostering a healthy and positive community around your game. Like, maybe if the energy was poured into fostering it around community, and I don't necessarily think the franchise model excludes that as a possibility. In fact, when you talk about it as like local communities, it's like there's a pathway where I think it can even be heightened, the goal of that. But, what's your take on that? I think obviously folks, as people who've been fostering the grassroots level, I'm assuming that resonates with you. It obviously resonates with me. I'm very almost like sort of consumer or customer focused in my approach to how games relate to an audience in some way. But what is your take on that? Do you see esports as requiring that flame, or is there a way to kind of brute force awareness into the community through esports as a marketing effort? I mean, I suppose you could come at it both ways. Yeah,
I think if you brute force it, you're always going to miss the mark. You're never going to hit the level of penetration that I think you would be hoping for. I think it takes both, to be honest, right? I think it creates the beacon, and then I think it also creates people who care about getting to that beacon, right? And I think these huge leagues they're impressive, right? There's a giant lighthouse up there, and everybody wants to be a part of it. But to get people, like, for people to care about that, for more people to care about that, you have to cultivate the community of people who even know what that thing is or even care about that thing. So I agree. They totally go hand in hand. I don't think you can have one without the other.
I think it's a really interesting point. Like, all of that 100%, right? You need that flame. You need it to be community driven. Like, think about the origins of esports. Like, the origins of esports was built by communities who were passionate about games or this game that they cared about, and they built the experiences themselves, right?
They built the leagues. They built the...
Totally.
You guys are a perfect example,
They built it locally, and then it expanded and expanded. I think as I look back on all the different organizers and big organizations, like, most of them that started from that community level, but yes, sometime in the last decade, we've transitioned from the community pushing it for themselves and craving this recognition, this from sponsors, from media, from the community, this, hey, esports is a thing, pay attention, we're real, to, oh God, all we are is real, right? Like, we're transitioned from the community-driven aspect to publisher-driven, where it's maybe not aligned with the exact same reasons why, right? Like, the why behind the community-driven esports is all about engaging, celebrating these games we love, doing it for the right reasons. And that still exists in these big leagues that we're talking about, right? But in terms of kind of cart before the horse, like, I can see it. I can see it a little bit.
An interesting example of where I think sometimes that tension exists is in the example of sort of crowd-funded prize pools. There's this tension between, look, this is a positive community-driven effort of, like, hey, let's raise a prize pool to celebrate the pros that we love or on the game that we love. And, maybe a developer like Valve is fostering that with in-game items and all, it can have this very positive approach. But then there's this, this sort of dark potential of, like, oh, and while we're at it, we'll take X% of that as well, right? Like, and I think it is such a slippery slope as a developer capable of tapping into the enthusiasm and kind of passion of a community around a product like a game. The balance between are you accessing that passion in a healthy way and respecting it in a way that is sort of giving it back, or are you overreaching, is a very tricky question. And I think crowdsourced prize pools and the amount, like the systems within which companies are choosing to operate with those prize pools is almost like an interesting litmus test. It's like, well, what does your crowdsourced prize pool look like? And how, it's kind of like a perfect example of the tension that exists between community enthusiasm and the positive potential of it, to make your prize pool as big as the community wants it to be. But then for companies to also say, how do we take a piece of that enthusiasm and put it in our pocket? And so, I don't know, I'm curious to get your take on that. Like, are you believers in that stuff?
It's interesting, because so much time from the publisher side also raises the, that publisher philosophy too of, I think maybe sometimes publishers maybe don't do a really great job articulating this. But I think the publisher perspective is almost like, okay, great. Awesome, we should do this, but how can we make this thing sustainable? How can we make it cost neutral? How can we continue doing this thing so that if, say, the player base deteriorates, the league doesn't disappear also? So I think it's, it's tricky.
You can see
it's tricky.
It's a tough spot. I mean, we had these conversations at Blizzard, right? Like,
it's easy to vilify the publisher. But to your point, what you're trying to say is they're looking for ways to ensure some sort of stability here and business viability when it feels like the money they might be pouring into it is just disappearing.
And even that, like, there's still publishers all over the board, right? But it's a totally tricky balance. And like, I mean, at Blizzard, we had conversations, right? Where do we even we want it to be sustainable, but do we take a piece of that and keep it to kind of fund the sustainability of it? It feels bad for the community. We don't want to take advantage, so let's not do it. Like, those conversations are real. So it's like, there's no right answer, right? Like, there's some line that has to be.
But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to
where's your community stand on these things, right?
That, and I also think it's what are your values as a company and how transparent are you going to be about it? Because I think the worst thing that can happen is not saying anything and have doing the right thing and having people think you're doing the wrong thing, or especially today it's. I think players are really on the lookout for people doing the wrong thing and wanting to align themselves with companies that share the same values. And I think it's important for the organizers, whether that's the publishers or other tournament organizers, to be very, very transparent about it. What's going on behind the scenes if you're wanting to put your hand out for the community, and then also what is it you stand for? What are your values? Do you want to be able to allow everything that the community gives you and put it back into this thing, or is it maybe it is important for you to make this thing a successful business? And at the end of the day, I think if you have the right values, it will guide the company, whatever it is, to draw that line at that right point.
It's actually really important for institutions who are choosing to walk down these paths to ensure they're aware that they're making a partnership with the community in a way. And that includes a sense of almost moral obligation, like they are your partner in this effort. How do they feel? Do they feel like they're rewarded for being involved? Are they a happy partner? Are they sad? Like, I think it's important to not just toss up your crowdsourced prize pool, but to realize the kinds of accountability that you're sort of held to in that relationship.
And with any partnership, there's expectation setting, right? You have to set those expectations, to your point, up front. So there's no surprises down the line. And this something that not everyone does as articulately as potentially they could, right?
For sure, man. What else about the future of esports? I know that this stuff is not going away. I'm obviously a massive fan. I know you guys are too. It's an interesting conundrum, when you think about traditional sports and how, football is football. It doesn't change. But games have this sort of itinerant nature, right? They kind of, they're big and then they disappear. But maybe we're still in the early stages, right? Maybe MOBAs will always be here. Maybe this is a version of basketball that will always be a rule set that we love, RTS, right? Like, maybe that's a form factor of competitive gaming that will just continue to rebirth itself. Do you have thoughts on that? Like, how does the sort of nature of games and their continual iteration and improvement sort of keep up with the framework of competitive games, like, and the need to know a rule set and to appreciate it and to kind of build an audience around that rule set. Like, I mean, I suppose this is all yet to kind of play itself out.
I would say at the very least it's a barrier to entry, right? I think we can say that we would like every game to last forever, but games are going to come and go. There are some games, I think, that will prove that they have the longevity and the sustainability to last decades. And even those games, I think, will receive updates over time. And it's, I think, one of the big most important things is, how do you make it so that a fan can stay a fan even if they lapse in being a fan, right? How can you make it so that it's as seamless as possible and as easy to get involved with as possible? But I think it's a challenge. I think it's a big challenge that industry is going to have to overcome, right? I think it's a challenge for these leagues also, right? If your game, is a little bit older, what do you do? Do you transition the game? Do you retire a game and keep this brand equity and this fan base that you already have? Or do you continue trying to push that forward? I think time will tell what the best answer is. I could definitely see arguments for both sides.
Well, we've seen even Rude War and original StarCraft
still alive. Like, League of Legends has been around over a decade and still just as powerful as it was years ago. Absolutely. So I think there'll always be a few games that kind of transcend the normal life cycle, but I don't necessarily think the ebb and flow of player base and of game title is a bad thing. I think, we talk about learning new rule sets, but gamers are adaptive. They love to learn. They love to hop into the new thing, and esports inevitably will always follow the player base. Like, I think it's a losing proposition, and kind of the exception of a couple footnotes, to try to force an esport for a game that people aren't actively playing, at least in today's market, right? So I think to some extent we have to figure out, how do we embrace that change? Publishers that have multiple titles, how do you develop ecosystems and kind of infrastructure to embrace that and not shy away from it, right? You don't want to have to reinvent a sport when kind of the game is when it's nearing the end of its life cycle. But at the same time, you want to be able to jump into a new title quickly to transition the player base, the viewer base. So I think it's something that remains to be determined, but I think inevitably there will always be that ebb and flow, and the publishers and kind of the organizers that are most successful will be the ones that learn how to transition with that flow.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I've taken a lot of your time tonight. You've been very generous with the conversation and reliving these old moments from Blizzard days. Very excited, obviously, about your future and what you're going to bring to bear on esports and gaming, and look forward to hearing more about that. You guys are incredibly talented, and I'm honored to know you and look forward to being a part of that process. If there are folks who've been watching this that want to kind of be in touch with you or reach out to you, what's the best way? Is it Twitter, LinkedIn? What do you guys prefer?
Good question these days. I'd say people Twitter is probably the easiest.
Twitter.
LinkedIn is what will probably get you the fastest response these days.
I don't think I posted on Twitter in like 3 years.
It's been a while, but if you send me a message, I'll answer your message. So, fair enough, our names, Adam Rosen and Tyler Rosen, and on LinkedIn too. Awesome. But it's been great, Kevin, chatting with you, reliving these memories has been a lot of fun. It's sometimes like we don't take enough time to think back about the journey and the pathway, especially how we got to where we are. And
we were so go, right? Actually finding the time to sit back and kind of reminisce a little bit is always exciting.
Absolutely, man. Well, we'll do it again. Look forward to hearing what's up next, and if you guys want to ever come on and talk some more esports stuff, we'll do it. So,
totally, absolutely. Thank you,
guys.
Kevin.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, guys, and we'll be back with another one sometime soon. See ya.